You're listening to Tarazi Tuesdays with the Bible as Literature.
Hi, this is Father Marc Boulos, and you are listening to Tarazi Tuesdays with the Bible as Literature podcast. In today's program, Father Paul wraps up his question and answer session on Genesis chapter 25. I am delighted to introduce Father Paul on the Bible as Literature podcast, Tarazi Tuesdays.
Again, my keyword is ipakoi, which has to be translated as submission in Genesis, and the best way for submission in Arabic is Islam. This is where the Jews and the Christians get frustrated with me. You submit. You know, Arabic is very interesting. I don't know if I mentioned on other podcasts, but let's hear it now. That the root for peace, shalom, salam, and to throw down your weapons in front of the one who has won the battle and to give in are from the same root. Salama, Aslama, Salam. Now, other people may include, how could you do that? How could you do that? It's like asking a pro-Orthodox priest who makes sure not to have the spoon touch the mouth, and he throws communion at a distance. And it fits nicely. It works. So anyway, these things, all I can say time and again, what I said in my Rise of Scripture, that hopefully someday, when people know by heart the Bible in Latin, but better in Greek and best in Hebrew. Notice, I didn't mention Arabic, because Arabic is the trickiest, because you think you are closest to the original. But sometimes the translation does not. Although in Arabic we have the root, Adam, which is ground, but the translators don't use it.
It's interesting you say that, because to his people here in Tyndale, and while we're learning, let's learn. I'm curious about this word in Arabic. It's ila qawmihi. It's a different root for people. This word.
Oh, then it's to his kin.
To his kin. Okay.
To his kin. This is qawm. And you know that the Arabic is taken, the Tyndale, and makes it fit. The translators like to have things fit, because that's the intention of translation.
They play the same game.
In its bad sense, it eliminates the original. I mean, take Ezekiel. Ezekiel, verse 2, chapter 3, was corrected already in the Septuagint. Proston ikon to Israel, and then he uses the plural. Tus para pikrenondas, those who embitter me, and thus provoke rebellious disobedience. So he uses the singular house of Israel, and then rebellious nations, or nations of rebel, he translated just the rebels. So he keeps the plural, because the Septuagint is done in that way. That all the people of Israel, every individual, all of them, but it misses the word goyim. Let me check the Latin. No, this is where Jerome tried to, he said ad gentes or gentes, goyim. So anyway, that is something I believe it's good that we hear time and again in my podcasts, so that it enters through the ears of the hearers into their being so that we would be ready next time, not to say, it can't be, and I don't like that. And no, that's what the author wants to say. And the ultimate answer, an example, you can do it yourselves with the people. Just show them where Tigris appears. Now, you hear it once. If you're not from the area, you don't know what it's referring to. Euphrates, slowly on, you'll get to hear it. Anyway, that would be, I believe it's valuable for our intent, ultimately, that we hear Scripture.
I was struck by the way that the author breaches the fourth wall from time to time and speaks directly to the reader. And in this moment where he talks about where Ishmael went to, he says, when you go to Assyria, Assyria doesn't exist in the scenario that Abraham is in the story, considering Ashrim was just born in this very chapter. It seems like it's speaking to an audience that could not have been in Abraham's time, who's supposed to be reading back at this story.
Now I can tell you're not a Shemite. The other way to look at it is that he is the father of all and everyone through chapter 17 of circumcision, where his seed proceeds through a commandment of God related to circumcision and not to seed as biological seed. But the father, it's like Adam. You can draw the same conclusion that he seems to be out. But he is the head. I mean, look at the family tree. At one point, you must have one. Otherwise, it can't be a tree. My family tree says our grandfather David was in Gaza in 1753. Now, did David land from planet Mars? I'm not saying this. I'm saying in this particular tree, you are starting with David as being the reshit of the matter. So the examples you gave me show me, to my mind, which is biblical Semitic, the conclusion is the opposite of yours. That he is the one who brings everybody together. And that's why ultimately, let's jump to Galatians where, Avraham. That's very important. But the biblical Abraham, not like the Jews imagine him that he was a historical person and so on, and we are and you're not. Because the Jews in the sense contradicts themselves, because you are a Jew on the 8th day, not when you are born. You become a son of Abraham on the 8th day, not at your birth. And that's the trouble with modern Israel. They want to control and so on. Is Jew the one whose mother is Jew and so on? That's not biblical. They can do whatever they want. All I'm saying that you created, as a famous Israeli scholar says, that Judaism was created in the 19th century, this modern Judaism, the way we understand things. So that is, again, important. And slowly on, I started to stress. I coined it and I stress it. And everybody who parrot it does not give this, like a famous professor who left Seminary like to quote me, the scriptural God and the scriptural Christ. And so it just, he wants to sell his theology. No, for me, scriptural as it is presented in Scripture. And you know, my extreme statement is that even God, there is not a God that Scripture makes scriptural. The scriptural God comes out of Scripture. It is projected by Scripture. And that is in our traditions. Look how, the Protestants don't kiss the Bible, but they have it at the center. And so we have the gospel, which is, and then we kiss it. It is. You bless with Scripture. You don't bless with God. The Orthodox are silly. They have the Pantocrator using the blessing that is used in Orthodoxy. Is that for real? Is that for real? You're making the Pantocrator, the only priest in Hebrews, a reflection of your priesthood. But again, theology does that and so on, and we have to work together. And I'm glad I'm dealing with you because you have your own podcast and you try to. It is something that we have to absorb and make it functional. And it is you, by looking at the text from this perspective, that you will find other things. And there is no last word. You remember my big joke. Actually, I'm happy that I'm a big joke. Now, Father Dustin Lyon says, I'm waiting for Father Paul's fourth last book after his second last. Well, but my second last has info that is not found in my first last. And don't tell Dustin, because he will think he's a prophet. I'm already preparing a third last. And if you ask me what triggered it, and I tell you, no way, Jose, you will hear it out of my lips for now. Very important. So, anyway, questions clarify things, and they are very important. So long, and this is my hope, that the hearers will be hearing me before and after your questions. But that's a hope. That's all we can say.
The Bible as Literature is a production of the Ephesus School Network.